Hey guys, Mike here, MBell556, and in today's video we're going to go over 3 easy steps to modify the 3rd generation 308 magazines so that they'll work in the new small frame 308 rifles, the so-called Generation 2 DPMS and this Adams Arms small frame 308. And the fix is very simple and very quick. The issue comes up with this new Generation 3 Pmag and the small frame 308s. And this is the magazine that was shipped with my Adams Arms small frame 308. So when I took it out to the field to test it, it did not hold the bolt back with a 1 round in the magazine test. I thought the gun was undergassed, but as it turns out, it's just a magazine issue because every other magazine that I've tried, the Generation 2 Pmags, IMI Defense mags, the Lancer magazines, they all hold the bolt back fine with this rifle. And the issue is if you put the magazine in the rifle and then go ahead and just charge the gun and let it fly, it just doesn't hold the bolt back. Okay, there it held back barely, let it fly completely. And so when you're firing, it just doesn't grab the bolt catch enough to hold the bolt back on an empty magazine. Now before we start modifying this magazine, let me state the obvious. If you start to do any kind of modification on this magazine, then you're not going to be able to send it back to the factory. So if you don't like the concept of this magazine not working in your new small frame rifle, and you don't want to fiddle with this magazine, then just go ahead and send it back. There are several other magazines that will do fine with these small frame 308s. And I've also heard that Adams Arms is working on trying to modify the bolt catch so that it'll work with these magazines. But in my way of thinking, the problem really isn't the rifle or the rifle system as much as it is just a change in this magazine, since all of the other brands of magazines and the Generation 2 Magpuls work fine. But obviously it's your choice. Once you start modifying the follower, you cannot send this back and expect Magpul to exchange it or take care of it. So it's your decision. For me, it's a simple, quick, easy fix. It doesn't have any downsides and it takes very little time and effort. So for me, I think this is a good magazine. Otherwise, I'd just soon keep it and make sure that this magazine now will work in every rifle that I put it in. The issue can be seen between the Generation 2 and the Generation 3 magazine followers. If we look closely, on the left, we have the Generation 2 and the new Generation 3 is on the right. And when you look at the lateral contour of the magazine follower, you can see that the contour is very rounded in the Generation 2. And for whatever reason, they have squared off the lateral contour of the follower in the 3rd generation Pmags. And that's interacting with this lip and not allowing the follower to rise completely, which then keeps the back of the follower from fully engaging the bolt stop. From this angle, you can see where that rounded contour laterally on the Generation 2 is interacting with this lip and allowing the follower to sit a little higher. On the 3rd generation, this right angle on the lateral edge of the magazine follower is interacting on the side of the feed lip, and it's preventing the magazine follower from riding as high. You can see the difference here. See the follower and the top of the magazine. And the Generation 2s work fine because the back area here is allowed to engage the bolt stop just another millimeter in height. Now there's a video that shows a fix, and it involves cutting a right angled groove in the lateral portion of this follower. The issue I had with that technique is trying to keep a straight line with your Dremel tool as you're cutting the right angled groove, and also control your depth without having a jig and having this magazine follower set up in a vise. It's just a lot more difficult to precisely cut a right angled groove. So it seemed like it would be a lot simpler just to put a little bevel to more closely replicate what you see with the second generation Pmags. This is a magazine that I did the bevel on, and you can see it's just a couple of millimeters of bevel. You mark just so you know where the feed lip is sitting on the magazine follower, and you know that's the area that needs to be addressed. So 3 easy steps, takes just a couple of minutes. Step 1 is to disassemble the magazine. So let's go through and show how simple this really is. So the first thing we want to do before we disassemble the magazine is go ahead and mark with a felt tip marker the area that is interacting with the feed lip on the right side of the magazine. After we've got the mark, the first step in making the modification is just disassembling the magazine. Okay, there's the follower. This is the second generation, which works fine. And let me go ahead and just show you the difference in the followers. You see the lateral edge, how it's rounded. You can see the lateral edge of the third generation Pmag follower is squared. So what I want to do now that we have our mark is just where the mark is, we're going to put just a very slight bevel. So to illustrate the difference in the modification that I'm doing as opposed to what's been out there on the internet, if you look at the contour of this magazine follower, okay, it's shaped like this, okay? And what's been done is to cut a groove at a right angle using a Dremel tool just a couple of millimeters down, and just get rid of this part of the magazine follower so that the follower will ride higher. And that certainly will work, but once again, the issue I had is just cutting that and controlling the depth in both directions as you're trying to cut a straight line right angle groove is just more difficult to do without clamps and jigs. And so if you're going to do it by hand, I think it's going to take a lot longer and it's going to be less precise. Whereas just taking this magazine follower, holding it by hand, and then at a 45-degree angle, just taking the tool and going ahead and putting a small bevel on this seems to do just fine, and it's much simpler. So what I'm proposing, rather than taking a square groove out, is just let's cut a little 45-degree or so angled bevel, and that way we're going to more closely approximate the Generation 2 follower. It's easier and simpler to do by hand. So let's show the modification. Okay, so now we have our marked follower, and all we're trying to do is put about a 45-degree angle bevel so we can hold it by hand and just take our tool and just make a couple of simple passes, trying to put a small bevel in this area. Okay, and you can see the bevel now. And all we're doing is taking off about a millimeter or 2 millimeters of material. That took just a few seconds to do. And that bevel is all we need to do to make this magazine work. So let's try it now in the gun and see what happens. Step 3 is to reassemble the magazine now. So we're just going to put the spring back in position. Reinsert the magazine follower into the body. Replace the floor plate. And now we have our modified magazine. So let's test it now. We'll put our modified magazine into our small frame 308. And then we're going to pull it all the way rearward and let it fly. Okay. Very good engagement. It is not letting the bolt fly. Very simple modification. quick and easy.
So to see what our modification is done, we have the second generation Pmag. You can see how close the top of the follower is to the top of the magazine feed lip. Here in the generation 3, the magazine follower actually gets stopped short of getting all the way to the inside of the feed lip. And then after our modification, you can see the difference between here and here. Okay. About a millimeter of difference is all it takes to make the magazine interact with the bolt stop and for the bolt stop to function reliably.
So I hope you found the information useful. If you did, please consider hitting the like button. If you have any questions or comments, please post those and I'll try to respond to those in a timely fashion. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. After we've got the mark, the first step in making the modification is just disassembling the magazine. Okay, we'll put our modified magazine into our